So this is the 6th year of the Kurt Schork Memorial Awards. It's the second time it's been held in London, right here at the Frontline Club, and this is a perfect location for it. This was started shortly after Kurt died by his partner in life and former Reuters colleague, Sabina Kosic. She's here, and she'll be presenting these beautiful awards to the winners. But this was done in order to recognize the type of journalism and journalists that Kurt stood for. So a freelance journalist working for a big publication and a local journalist working in their own country and often either independently or helping the Western journalists who sort of fly in and rely entirely on those local journalists and fixers. This year there were more than 90 entries in the two categories. The preliminary judges, Nicholas Moore and David Rogers, formerly of Reuters, commended the high quality of all entries before weaning them down to about 7 candidates in each category. The 2007 Kurt Schork Award in International Journalism, the local category, goes to Sahar al-Haideri. She was 45 when she was shot down by insurgents in Iraq in June, this past June, June the 7th. That's a picture of her there on the screen. And according to Mosul's deputy police chief, where she was killed, her name was 4th on a hit list prepared by the so-called emir of the Islamic State of Mosul. Haideri was aware of the risks that her work entailed. Rodney was talking about the number of journalists who've been killed, and most of them are in their countries of origin. Iraq is one of the deadliest places for journalists today. There's Russia, there's Mexico, there are other places as well, but Iraq is really very deadly, and every journalist there knows the incredible risk they take in just even naming themselves a journalist. You may have seen in the New York Times recently, there was an editorial. The editors felt moved to write down the statement of a group of Iraqi women who just won a different award and did the same kind of work as Sahar. Basically, they said, like I'm sure she said, that you can't even brag about being a journalist. You can't tell your children, you can't tell your friends, you don't know whether you're going to survive that day, you don't want anybody to know what you do, you can't have your picture broadcast or known around, and you have to keep what you do completely secret in case you're found out and killed by the people who want to silence you. In recent years, Sahar had published articles under various pseudonyms, and she took many, many opportunities to leave the city to attend training courses either in Sulaymaniyah, the relative safety of Kurdistan, one place where Iraq actually does work, and also in Amman, Jordan. Sometimes she would go on short trips to Syria, and she had already moved her family out of Mosul, but she always wanted to go back. And I remember talking to Tony in the summer about her, in fact, in June, just around the time when she'd been killed, and how she did know that she was in danger, but she was so motivated, Tony, wasn't she, by her job and by her passion and by her commitment, and she obviously didn't believe that the worst was going to happen to her. But in declaring her the winner, the final judging panel of Lindsay Hilson, Christina Lamb, Mona El-Talwe, Brian Groom, and Ray Bonner, the judges said, quote, "Her investigation of the honor killing amongst the Yazidis was exceptional for its detail, its graphic description, and her interviewing of people close to the story, which is very difficult and dangerous in Iraq. The decision that this was an important story is borne out by the subsequent attacks on the Yazidis, which was not long ago. There is a passion to these stories and an eye for the telling," quote. And now here is Sahar's colleague, Linda Jamil of the BBC, to read an excerpt of one of the winning stories that were written for IWPR and filed just a month before she was killed.
Honor killing sparks fears of new Iraqi conflict. Bashika, a small town sitting in lush green hills east of the city of Mosul, used to be regarded as an island of peace and stability, while vast areas of post-Saddam Iraq were plunged into civil war. Home to a population that is 70% Yazidi, members of an old sect that is neither Muslim nor Christian, Bashika was spared the sectarian and ethnic strife between Arabs and Kurds, radical Sunnis and Shia, that plagued surrounding areas. People from Mosul would drive 25 kilometers to Bashika to have picnics to enjoy the tranquility of a little town there, where Yazidi temples, Muslim mosques, and Christian churches stand in close proximity, presenting a rare image of tolerant coexistence. Until April the 7th, that is, on that day, a furious mob stoned a 17-year-old girl to death, while bystanders applauded and filmed the killing on their cell phones. Her crime: Dua Khalil Aswad, a Yazidi, had run away from home because she had fallen in love with a Muslim boy. It was not the first love story of its kind, nor was it the first honor killing in a region where women are subject to strong social restrictions and face severe punishment for disregarding family, tribal, or religious traditions. The case highlights the absence of rule of law and the acceptance that family disputes should be dealt with by relatives rather than outsiders from the judiciary, even when the resolution involves murder. At least one eyewitness said members of the security forces stood by and did not intervene as Dua was stoned to death. The story began when Dua, a second-year student at the Fine Arts Institute in Bashika, fell in love with her neighbor Muhannad, the owner of a nearby cosmetics shop. Muhannad used to wait for Dua after her college classes, and her parents were aware of the relationship. One hard and fast rule of Yazidi tradition is that marriage outside the faith is not permitted. To circumvent this, Dua reportedly asked Muhannad to elope with her, but he refused, saying that Muslim tradition recommends that both families give their blessings to a marriage. Finally, Dua decided to convert to Islam so that she could marry Muhannad. She informed her parents, who were not pleased, but did not take any action to stop her. They appear to have regarded her decision as a domestic matter and not one for the wider community. When her tribe learned of her conversion, the girl took refuge with a Yazidi cleric, a common practice when people fear retribution. She stayed with in the cleric's home, and her parents begged him not to surrender her to anyone, according to Mustafa Muslim, a grocer in the town. On April the 7th, Aswad's uncles came to the cleric and told him that the family had forgiven the girl and wanted her to return with them. She thought they had really forgiven her when she was going to her death, said Muslim. After just a few yards, Dua was surrounded by 13 of her cousins, together with a large crowd of other Yazidis. They started kicking and punching her, pulling her hair, and forcing her to the ground, said Muslim, who witnessed the event. She was shouting for help. Her father tried to get her, but the people stopped him. In a subsequent interview with a local TV station, the father said he had sent his brother to bring the girl home, but had no idea that a group was waiting to kill her. A brutal execution lasting 2 hours followed, most of which was filmed on mobile phones. The footage, which circulated first among Mosul residents and later on the internet, showed the girl on the ground surrounded by a frenzied crowd. Young men beat and kick her, first throwing small stones and then fetching bigger ones and large concrete bricks. The girl, bleeding heavily, desperately tried to protect her face with one hand and cover her naked legs with the other after her dress was being torn. After a while, she stopped moving. As she lay still, the cheering crowd continued to throw stones at her. Later, her killers took her body to the outskirts of town, burnt it, and buried her remains with those of a dog, to show they regarded her as worthless and dirty. A post-mortem showed that Dua had died of fractured skull and spine.
You can see why she won. That was an incredibly written story. And sadly, you know, it's not an exotic crime that's confined to Iraq. Honor killing happens right here as well as in many other parts of the world. And it really troubles me that people do it in the name of God and because they think that this is the right thing to do. When you read the kind of description that Sahar wrote about it, you can really feel the outrage and the outrage of this. There's a short film we're going to see now on Sahar. It begins with her on a speaking tour in the US with Iraqi journalists and ends with an interview with her husband.
أنا فقدت 14 زميل وزميلة قتلوا من الصحفيين في العراق خلال سنة.
Within a year, I lost 14 female and male friends who were journalists working as journalists in Iraq.
هناك جماعات مسلحة دخلت إلى العراق.
There are gunmen groups who entered Iraq actually across the borders to Iraq.
تعلن الحرب والقتل وتبث العنف ضد العراقيين.
They announce war against the Iraqi people, only the Iraqi people.
مما سبب فقدان الأمن والأمان في العراق.
And this led to losing safety and security in Iraq.
دعاء تلك المرأة الحديدية التي تحدت كل الصعاب وأثبتت لكل زملاء المهنة وفي كل بقاع الأرض أن الشهادة في سبيل نقل الحقيقة شرف لا شرف يفوقه، ولتكون نجماً ساطعاً يتلألأ في سماء الحرية. سحر لن تموت لأنها تعيش في قلوب الفقراء التي طالما ما كتبت عنهم ونقلت معاناتهم، وأن روحها ستظل طيفاً يلازم الأحرار وحدهم، بل ستظل رنين كلماتها تصدح في كل حدب وصوب. سنتذكر قوتك وشجاعتك يا سحر. سحر عرفتها شجاعة جريئة، أماً وزوجة وأختا وزميلة تقدس قلمها وواجبها، وتدرك أن الصحافة مهنة الانحياز للوطن والفقراء، ومهنة الواجب الأصعب، والنهج الوطني الواضح. ونحتاج في الوقت نفسه من عهد من الزملاء الصحفيين العراقيين أن يظلوا قابضين على حجر الحقيقة إلى أن يطفئوا نار حقد الأعداء. أقدم خالص تقديري وامتناني إلى معهد صحافة الحرب والسلام IWPR، وبالذات أستاذ عمار الشابندر والعزيزة سوزانا، وكذلك من كورت شورك لما قدموه من دعم للكلمة الحرة.
Husband and family is the chairperson of the Schork Memorial Fund and the founding mother of this organization, to her friend Linda Jones.